Any other agenda revisions? Hearing none, we'll move on to general public comments. Any general public comment?
Yes, thank you. I'm Marcia Bancroft. I'm the mother of Betsy Bancroft. And Betsy is a homeowner in the town of Orange and has been here for 19 years. She works on Monday night, so she couldn't be here, so I'm reading her letter. Dear Mr. Homer and Mr. Wilson, Mom has been keeping me informed about the meetings regarding the beavers next to the town hall. As select board members, you have a responsibility to respect the tax-paying citizens of Orange and to follow the policies, guidelines, and laws of the town of Orange and the state of Vermont with regard to decisions about the beavers. Especially the regulations from Vermont Fish and Wildlife that are based on sound biological science must be followed. Already 70% of the wildlife globally has been lost, and humanity cannot continue killing everything in nature without it coming back to us. Thank you for listening. Sincerely, Betsy Bancroft.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
There are no other
I have two things.
general public comments?
I have two things from two residents that could not be here tonight. The first one is from Siobhan Perricone, who lives on Trickle Brook. She wants me to read this. I am unable to attend the select board meeting tonight because our neighbors are meeting about our road. I'm hoping that my statement might be entered into the record for the meeting. This is her statement. I am expressing my complete support for the towns to have discussion with the state's beaver specialist, Tyler Brown, in order to effectively address the ongoing conflict with beavers within our community. The state offers various non-lethal methods to tackle such issues, as recently highlighted in a local news article. Given the expertise of the state's beaver specialists, it just makes sense for us to seek their guidance. It would be beneficial for the town to extend an invitation to this expert, urging them to address not only the select board, but also those citizens interested in attending. This would ensure reliable and direct information for all interested parties. This approach would be more efficient than relying on second or third hand accounts.
Okay, if there's no other public comments, then we move on.
That's actually a good idea. I'm sorry.
We move on to item number 4, which is discuss and consider beaver mitigation actions. So, we left it at the last meeting, was I would contact Fish and Wildlife according to the beaver management best practices or human beaver conflicts. I followed what they said, and I reached out to the local warden. And I got his input on it.
What was his name?
Michael Scott.
Michael Scott.
What he said was it would be within the town's rights and following the plan if we hired someone to trap or otherwise kill the beaver. If it's causing any damage, or even if it isn't, but if it's a potential risk to town property, the state does recognize and support removal of the beavers.
I understand that, but I still would like to take the other route first prior to that. Pretty much everything I've read leads up to taking care of, you know, going by chain, basically. You do this and this and this, and if that fails, then you...
Well, it's already failed because we have a septic system back up over there. We have potential pipes that go underground. If we ever need them, we will not be able to use them.
So basically, we are done with any septic over there. So if we don't, that's about it.
Well,
Public-
according to the
Porta potties.
septic report, it doesn't affect that.
Which report?
From,
Is that the one?
I emailed it to you.
Yeah, no, we are not going to recognize or anything with that. I contacted that septic company who would not stand by that, and they asked to not be involved in the situation at all.
Oh, they did?
Yes, they were misled about the purpose of them coming out here. And even during the time they were here, they said they don't want they don't want their name anywhere involved in this. They have customers in town and they don't want to be appeared to take sides. And they thought that when they came out, they were acting on behalf of the town.
They knew they were not acting on behalf of the town. That was very clear, and I have all of that in writing. And I specifically, the communication that was provided to Sheila by the company was specifically said very clearly, this, communication is being presented to the select board.
Yeah, that's,
Yes, she was correct.
that's not what they realized that afterwards.
So
Their-
now they
their
just
bill was
wanna
made
pull
out
that?
to the town of Orange.
No, it was not. It was made out to Emily Ruff, and I paid it
Yes,
personally.
afterwards.
No,
No, that's not what they told me on the
Well,
phone.
I
They said
will-
they made out the bill to the town of Orange and then spoke with you, who said, no, I'm paying for this myself.
no, I made it very clear, and I have all the documentation from the initial appointment that I requested, that this was a
They
personal
requested
visit.
that we not use or recognize any of that.
Do you have any documentation of that, of their request not to recognize it?
No,
It was just a personal
It
phone
was a
call, that's
personal
not documented.
yes.
Whereas Emily does have documentation of a different version of events. I would appreciate, as a town resident, having documentation about that, so we know
Well, I can't
who
really
who
get a
can we
letter.
rely on and who can't we
And
rely
I
on.
don't think I can get a letter from them asking them not to be involved in this and then share that publicly, because that would directly put them and their business involved in this publicly.
But they already appear in the public record.
And it sounds like the only documentation they have is this information is to be presented to the select board, right? And then we have some personal, non-documented communication that says, oh no, we take it back, this isn't being presented to the select board. So I'm just confused about how that could stand to sort of subvert their previous documented report, if there's no evidence that they ever said that.
Well, I'm saying that they said that. That's the conversation that I had with them. I mean, you're free to call them and ask them yourself. I'm trying to agree, but I'm not willing to go against a local business and go against their wishes in this matter.
Non-lethal methods been attempted.
Yes.
How many?
I'm not sure, but it's been there almost 2 years now, or about 2 years, and
What? Just a
The
trap? Live trap or
you
something?
can't live
I
trap.
know you
So all
can't,
we
I'm
can
just
do is-
I'm asking what it is.
I believe there was with the Beaver mitigation, what are those things called? that they put in?
Beaver deceiver?
Yeah.
No, sir, it's an exclusion fence
An
provided
exclusion.
by Fish and Wildlife.
Okay. Is the warden the last word on this, or is there
The warden-
a stake of other people?
There's no regulation saying that we have to or not do anything to them. We can handle the issue any way we wish.
And you should handle it, which most represents the people of the town, right?
I believe the select board is responsible for doing it, not only what represents the people of the town, but also protects the town assets.
And have the town assets been evaluated by somebody besides somebody you know? Or, I mean, it's just this, we brought somebody else in, they looked at it under different pretense and...
There were a couple other ways that the warden recommended that we can, if we wanted to go further with this, to really assess the risk to the assets. The cheapest one would be hire a company to come in and dig test pits to see how high the water level is out there, and then have an engineer come in and look at the plans for the backup system and whatever is installed in there and see how close they are, and then have another company come in and see where the line is that goes underneath over to there.
Is your whole policy based on this one situation with this one, is it one beaver in one place for one situation? Or is this a
This is
town-wide
This
policy?
is for that one spot
one
right
spot.
there. So it's kind of up to the board to decide how much money we want to invest in protecting beavers right there. Just one small family of beavers.
Are there any intermediate steps that could be taken between the exclusion fence and just killing the beavers? Is there anything else that is an option or has been considered?
I guess the problem is we need to get rid of the water between there. We won't be able to maintain a pipeline underneath the beaver pond. If we need to do any repairs to it, or if we need to put that pipeline in service, we are going to have to dig it up, in which case we're going to need a wetland. We're going to have to remove the beavers and then need a wetland permit from A&R, if they're willing to give us one, to excavate that area.
Probably gonna need that anyway.
Whether or not the beavers are
Because
there.
Yeah.
whether or not the beavers are there, it's still a wetland.
Yeah, but they are going to more likely not grant it if the beavers Are they?
That's actually historically not true. There's no precedent for that. I also want to make a point of order that at the June 26th meeting, the residents specifically asked that the select board contact Tyler Brown, who Fish and Wildlife has.
You asked if we would follow the best management practices.
I
That was
asked,
the
and I
letter.
have it both documented on audio and in writing, that you contact Tyler Brown and not a local warden, because he is both the official that has consulted for the last 2 years in this property and is familiar with it, and is the staff person at the Fish and Wildlife Department that is tasked with communicating with towns about wetland beaver issues. I also asked that the select board watch his webinar from spring 2023, how towns can manage conflicts with beavers. And I also asked that any communication that came from Fish and Wildlife through the select board, if it was not going to be a public meeting, be delivered in writing. So I would love if we could review a copy of that, because that was agreed.
It was a verbal conversation. You're free to contact the warden if you wish.
You agreed to my request to provide that communication in writing at the end of the meeting.
There was no writing. If you want, I will write it down.
I would like Warden
I-
Scott to provide the assessment directly. And you, at June 26th, at the end of the meeting, when you said you would be taking the meeting with Fish and Wildlife, you didn't indicate that you were not going to call the expert at Fish and Wildlife, that you were going to call the
I
local
said
warden,
I was
and you
gonna be
also
following
indicated
the
that you
plan.
would be, we requested you speak to Tyler Brown. You indicated that you would have the representative from Fish and Wildlife provide written documentation to be presented at this meeting, so that we as residents could be sure
Yes.
that
and
we
there
were
was
not
no-
hearing misrepresented information.
There was nothing to provide in writing other than just saying you are within the guidelines to protect your town assets.
We
As
didn't-
residents, we're forced to take your word on that because there's not a physical record as is
Yes.
required by every select board in the state.
And was directly requested and agreed to at the end of this discussion at the June 26th
Yes,
meeting.
there is nothing in writing. If you doubt my sincerity, if you doubt my honesty with this, you feel free to contact the warden on this subject. You will have the same
I don't think that
authority.
should be the
Yeah.
responsibility of the residents when we specifically asked and you specifically agreed to make sure that there was documentation that could be reviewed by all of the select board members as well as the public in
And
writing.
just to speak to a larger point, I feel a little confused about it. It sounds like multiple residents are specifically requesting that the select board consult with the state specialist, which is the Beaver, what is it? The Beaver specialist?
Just Tyler Brown.
Right, so we have provided for just this kind of situation, a statewide specialist, and I felt utterly perplexed by why the select board isn't consulting directly with
The
that
select board, I
person.
believe, has consulted with that person in the past. They were aware of the situation. The game warden was aware of the situation. He said that Tyler Brown was aware of the situation, which is why, one of the reasons I didn't.
Right, but the
contact them
larger,
afterwards.
the question
If
for
they're
me is not,
already aware, then why are we going through this again and again and again?
Because you're the
other
one
than
that put
to
this on
delay
the agenda to
the-
revisit it. And we asked you to revisit it with the same official that gave us recommendations as a select board for the last 2 years.
it's clear that the select board is absolutely within its right to make decisions about how to deal with the beavers in order to protect town property. So certainly you could just make this decision to kill the beavers. But I'm also hearing that there are a lot of town residents that are really concerned with that plan, or that requesting that prior to making that very final choice, you consult with the specialist again, and that we consider mitigating strategies, because we have other concerns about it. So I guess that's why, it seems like this has been on the town agenda a few times. Why hasn't that happened, and why hasn't it been documented?
Well, I contacted, I was asked to follow the plan, follow the best management practices, which are not regulatory in any way. They are just the best management practices. First thing it says is to contact your local warden.
Since this issue's come up, Eric, I've noticed that we've provided a lot of documentation on resolutions for beaver conflicts. We've given you scientific papers, we've given you the most qualified people in the state to contact, and yet, this is the third meeting where I've heard the only evidence that you cite and to support the position that you have not bent on at all is like, oh, I called a couple of my friends in the fire department, oh, I called the warden, or I called the guy at the septic company. I haven't seen one piece of paper that substantiates any of your argument to take this drastic action.
I haven't seen any.
Can I say something?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
This is funny that we're here discussing this because if I remember correctly, Emily, you were on the board 2 years ago, right? Okay. So 2 years ago, if you had gone down there and harassed those beaver, or you had somebody go down there and harass those beaver when they were building that dam, those beaver would have moved on. We wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't be here discussing removal of them because we waited 2 years and now you left that problem to us.
We didn't let any problem pass, Kevin. We specifically consulted the state's expert on town beaver conflicts, and he gave us specific guidance in July of 2021, when Mr. Holmgren was still on the select board, and we adopted said guidance, and we alleviated the problem of the residential property that was part of why we called this in, as well as problems to our own road and culvert.
Well, at that point, the beavers were not at the dam they are now, they were on the other side of that small brook. And
Causing the same water level, in fact higher, in the
on the
overflow
other side,
septic
so
area.
they were causing damage there, so that's why they put those,
Yeah.
not a beaver deceiver, but the mitigation in, which caused the beavers to move downstream, build a larger dam. Now that is closer to our septic system and it's over the pipelines that go.
And the
there.
water level is miraculously lower, even though we have had a far rainier season this year than the prior 2 years.
And my concern has grown beyond the beavers now, hearing the expression that you have for actually destroying the wetland and turning it into something completely different. That is a much greater action than simply killing 2 beavers. Had you been speaking to the state's beaver biologist, he would tell you that if you remove beavers, especially now with the population expanding like it is, they're going to come back. You can't, the only way that I believe, by the little argument that you've made, that you think that you're going to prevent that is by destroying their habitat. You're not just destroying beaver habitat, you're destroying the habitat of black bear, moose, white-tailed deer, ermine, fox, coyote, wood ducks, and mink, and lots of other wildlife and plants and animals. And that, to me, as a town resident, is unacceptable when you only have as a defense that you called the word and he said that you could do whatever you want.
All my defense is we are defending town assets. And unless I see any other method.
There's been a lot of methods
Mitigate.
proven that work in municipalities throughout the state and the country. And the studies that show what he just spoke to are overwhelming about what the beavers do versus what the damages they can cause and you can't stop and mitigate. So if you're not willing to try anything else, you just dead end, right? You just go up to the warden and Mike and say, that's it. Well, isn't it, don't you have more responsibility than that?
I haven't heard any possible ways that would lower the water level to
You
not
shouldn't,
put
and have
our.
you looked, or are you just waiting for somebody to come to you with them?
I've looked and I've asked the townspeople here to provide any. I've talked to the warden and
Have you tried beaver deceivers?
I'm not even sure if that would.
I
be an
read in
option
this
over here
state
that
they've been
would-
used and worked.
At the last meeting, Mr. Holmgren, when Ms. Stone recommended that she speak to the person who invented beaver deceivers, Mr. Holmgren said, keep in mind his job is to sell us stuff, indicating that he was suspicious of that method
feel that
out the gate and
motivation?
unwilling to listen to any possibility that might arise from the
But the whole point is just to save your septic system and your thing, try to do as much as it takes to save those things. Your town, you don't want your stuff destroyed, of course. But you can't just randomly say, especially because of the history of this area, just unilaterally say, well, let's just get it over with. I mean, they're just more important than that nowadays. I think people are starting to understand that. And I can see the situation you're in, but I think maybe a little extra effort in that regard. And these people have put in, from what I've read, a lot of effort and shown that the research has been done to save them and to save property. So,
But I still haven't heard any arguments why, or any method that it would actually save.
I
property.
don't claim to be an expert myself, I've just read a lot, but I do know that there are other solutions. And I know that live trapping beavers is kind of a question, and relocating them, and he's right, the longer they've been there, they tend to just seem to pop back, but because of trails they leave. I'm not sure, how much acreage is this, are you talking about, this wetland and this area that's being affected in your septic?
It's just between here and the cemetery right there. And that's that little flat before the cemetery.
There's no other way to save the property without killing the beavers.
They're raising the water level, which is jeopardizing the ability of the leach field to properly work. I mean, if we had to build over there, we'd be looking at moving it, which is gonna be really tough, and having it engineered again, which is most likely gonna be a mound system over there.
How long has the septic been there?
Since 1983.
So it's already 40 years old. So you're probably gonna have to do something with it anyway, right?
Not really.
Is it a leach field? You talked about pipes that weren't being used, that want to be used maybe in
I
the
think it's
future.
the location of the replacement. Is it the location of the replacement field if this one
No,
fails?
there's the leach fields over there. And if you have a good leach field, it can go forever.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and there's no way.
Concrete?
No, it's the tanks over here, there's concrete,
Yeah.
and then it pipes across from here over onto the mountain just below the,
No way to reroute the leach.
nope.
There's no land out back here that don't have anything to do with the wetland.
Not that, no, it's not our
Well,
land.
see, that's the thing, this
It's
was not
out-
as
it's not out
much,
here.
There is. So, I mean, so things could be done to reroute the distribution rather than replace the whole system and thereby leaving the.
But how much does the town want to?
Well, there you go.
And if that
Good
does
point.
fail,
Yeah.
it will kill the beavers and be a much larger economic, environmental issue if the sewer water just starts flowing down the river.
Well, you don't want that, obviously. You can't put a septic system in that's gonna do that. But you-
But I mean, if
I mean,
it's already over there in the water
all
level.
fair and decent efforts. The way things are going, I think that people know the value of our animals is much more important than it used to be. And I think, you know, I see other things on the agenda that are gonna come to light. And I think people should do more about it. And if you have choices, and I'm sure your choices are not easy, but I also think that there are choices. I don't think you seem to get right up to the board and boom, like he said, that's it.
I'm trying to
And I
find
think there's gotta be,
Trying to find the least expensive way to protect the town assets.
well, you know, not
And
always the
it
least
means traffic.
expensive is the best, so, especially when you're representing people that feel different. I mean, you know.
that's why I say that 2 years ago, when this problem started up,
Yeah,
it should have been an harassment and the beavers would have.
hindsight's 20/20.
So we should get a time machine.
About that, right? You can't write much about that.
Well, I'll offer, sir, that at the June 12th and June 26th meeting, several grant programs were identified that could install a beaver deceiver. And Mr. Lyle, I am not sure has been contacted because obviously the chair is very skeptical of his advice, but he is contracted by both V-Trans and Vermont Fish and Wildlife and other towns to resolve issues like this, which would include making sure the water level has receded to a point that makes the overflow possible. So I think that, to your point, I think there are still things that are just summarily being pushed off the table here and not even being willing to be
I
reviewed.
think it's hard to get enough people involved in things that make the difference in a
You
town.
gotta address the select board.
Huh?
You gotta address us.
Yeah, I
You
think,
can't
yeah, I
address each
think
other.
it's difficult to get enough people that actually feel a certain way to be represented. It's very difficult in small areas like this, and
I
I
know
can
it seems like I
understand.
just want them dead and gone.
Yeah,
But the
okay, well, I like to
other
hear
issue
that.
is-
I like to hear that. But I think that she's right. I think that there are opportunities that may have been overlooked that possibly could be entertained, at least since you waited this long and there's not imminent destruction of, you know, obviously you kept kicking the can down the road, then maybe you could entertain it in a different way. And make some people happy at the same time. And some people.
If we could, we'd trap them and move them.
I get it, I
The
get
law
it.
says you can't, so,
Yeah, I'm,
I mean, I got beaver on my land.
yeah, I wouldn't, I don't want to kill anything, you know, nowadays. You know, everybody feels different about stuff, and I get that. But I think it's only fair with the amount of research that I've read and the amount of stuff I've seen local people do already. Somebody should, you know, in your position, should take a little bit, another step or two to see if there are other options.
Well, the other option would be we wait till hunting season. And then the water levels are gonna be higher, they're gonna freeze for winter, and then come spring, they're gonna be fennel, because there's not enough beavers in there, and it'll be worse sediment downstream than if we were.
Well, I'm not gonna claim that I know all the ramifications of what would go
That's
on
one of
in
the
the
things that
situation or
we're
how
learning,
long it's
so.
gone on. I agree. I'm not gonna say I know all that, but go ahead.
I have a couple brief comments. Someone else, go ahead, please
You're
go.
first, go ahead.
my first comment is that it's ecologically inaccurate to say that the beavers will create more sediment downstream and actually reduce the sedimentation. I want to point out that at the last 2 meetings, it was asserted that the town has liability for property damage downstream. I've confirmed with Fish and Wildlife and Secretary of State that there's no statute or case law precedent confirming that towns do have liability there, so it is very slim to none chance that, and yes, people are very litigious, especially towards municipalities, but I don't think that's very likely. The third brief thing I want to share is a July 6th quote from Tyler Brown of Fish and Wildlife, who says, whenever possible, maintain beaver-maintained wetland habitat because it is incredibly valuable. He offers several suggestions, including working with his department and working with Skip Lyle of Beaver Deceivers. And the final comment is that these devices allow beavers to make dams while reducing overhead and allowing water to flow freely. Fish and Wildlife says trapping should always be a last resort if no other solution is keeping beavers at bay.
And I would like to follow up with that with a paper that I'm going to submit for your review from the Journal of Flood Risk Management. It was published in February of 2021. And just to quote, it says, for example, large woody debris, such as beaver dams, can reduce sediment movement downstream and improve habitat quality. Also, beaver dams push water sideways onto floodplains, thus storing water and reducing flow rates in high rainfall events, contributing towards reduced fluvial flooding downstream. By storing water, dams also help maintain base flows during drought. Now, one of the things that you said at the last meeting was we needed to remove the beavers now while the water was low. I don't know if you've noticed, but the water is not low. It's probably not going to be low at all this summer. And so I would advise you to take this document under your advisement because it speaks directly to what you have inaccurately said about sediment movement.
I have one more comment, if I may, and I think this speaks to some comments that were shared by other residents. At the June 26th meeting, Eric, as chair, you said that you had trappers waiting in the wings to trap the beavers, and you also said, I've been following this a long time and I'm not hearing anything new tonight. I provided like a 12-page report that certainly in those few minutes of time you didn't have a chance to read or digest, or a chance to watch Tyler Brown's webinar that I encouraged you to. You also said about Skip Lyle with Beaver Deceivers to keep in mind that his job is to sell us stuff, and I think that begs the question as to what your job is, what's your profession, and what's your business
I'm a butcher.
of both the amazing Orange Central Vermont Custom Meats, Central Vermont Meats, which I'm hearing a lot of good things about from our neighbors, but also Orange Custom Game Processing, which is where hunters and trappers would bring their,
Not trappers, just.
but hunters
Yes.
would, and who are potentially also trappers, would bring their goods to you for processing. So I ask this and I establish this because I am certainly not the only resident that has felt frustrated hearing comments like, I've been following this a long time and I'm not hearing anything new tonight, while completely ignoring both comments from residents and papers and evidence that we're trying to establish. I would like to ask if anyone did speak to Skip Lyle, because right after you mentioned that you would provide documentation from Fish and Wildlife, I believe you said you
did
would.
not.
Okay.
I have not.
That was something that was established at the last meeting, and I think that for the sake of the residents, it would be helpful and important for that to be included, since it was something that was spoken of at the last meeting prior to any action or decision on this item being made. But I think, moreover, the concern that I have after the multiple comments that have been shared in these meetings by you, Eric, as chair, is the very real, if not perceived, conflict of interest that arises. Both a direct financial conflict of interest and also an indirect personal conflict of interest pursuant to the town's conflict of interest and ethics policy, which you and I and Sue established.
How so?
So I'll give you an example from the Secretary of State. A direct monetary interest is a conflict of interest that can be present when a local official acts on a matter affording the official a direct financial gain. So in the case of a legislative function, which is the development of policy or ordinance, An example that they provide, a select board is considering the adoption of an ordinance setting weight limits on local highways. One select board member owns a local trucking company and he might not be able to use roads if lower weight limits are imposed. In the case of the town of Orange, one select board member, or the select board is considering the adoption of a policy about trapping beavers on town land. One select board member owns a company that hunters and trappers are the clientele of to process their meat, and they may not be happy and not want to be your customers if you voted against that trapping. The other one is indirect personal interest. A conflict might be present when a local official acts on a matter in which the member's judgment may be affected because of personal relationships or members in organizations and desires to help that person or organization further its own interests. And they give several examples, and certainly if there are trappers just waiting in the background to take out the beavers here, then that seems to me a personal relationship that may cause some concern. So this is, all I'm doing is bringing this before the select board to consider.
If I can comment on that. I do not process any fur bearers. My processing is for meat only. I have thousands of customers. I can think of 4 that are trappers. I'm not personal friends with any of them. I don't know their business. I'm not a trapper. I don't go around in trapping circles. I don't even get a chance to hunt. I wouldn't even really consider myself a hunter. I'm a butcher. So the fact that they're beavers doesn't mean anything to my business. Whether they exist or don't exist, the corner of my property is noted by the beaver dam. Look at my property, that's the corner, is the beaver dam. We don't trap the beavers, we like them, we respect them. But when it comes to protecting money, I don't see why we shouldn't.
I would like to respond to an earlier statement about Skip Lyle. I've been in communication with Skip. I made him aware of this issue as soon as it began. We began communication probably about 2 years ago when we became concerned about the culvert on Provincia. And that was a device where there was a leveling device installed by Tyler Brown. The point I wanted to make about Skip Lyle is that he didn't want to come to the select board meeting because he saw that as a conflict of interest, since he is a contractor. But he remains the state authority, not even just the state authority, one of the national authorities on this exact issue. And the reason that he has been hired by so many communities in Vermont is because it satisfies all the concerns of both sides of the people who want to trap and those people who, like us, who want to protect the wetlands. So I just really implore you to remember that there was a petition presented to you representing the interests of over 5% of the town's residents, and they would all implore you to explore other options, including the recommendations from the state's most experienced beaver biologist and possibly the Northeast's most experienced specialist on dealing with beaver conflicts.
I'd make one more brief point in sharing with you the state statute and the VLCT statute about conflict of interest. I should actually read directly from the policy here in the town. And while it references direct financial conflict and indirect personal conflict, which are the 2 examples I cited, Article 4A2 also references a situation where a public officer has publicly displayed a prejudgment of the merits of a proceeding. And I can't help but feel that your comment last week, having not read my report, having not watched the webinar, having not consulted with other experts, that said I've not heard anything new tonight and my mind is made up, to me signifies a public display of a prejudgment on an issue.
Well, I can speak to that too. Everybody has an opinion. They can be changed. I hadn't seen anything to that point that would have changed my opinion.
You hadn't read the report yet.
Exactly. So up until that point, I hadn't seen anything. So what part of that statement would be inaccurate or be considered?
I've seen it now, and would it change your mind?
It did not change my mind.
So you
but
thoroughly looked through it, and it didn't change your mind at all?
no, I'm still fixed on protecting town assets.
Can I just ask for some more information, excuse me, Lee? I'm just interested in getting some more information about the beaver deceiver, because it sounds like there is potentially another mitigating strategy that could be used. And it doesn't sound like we have a ton of information about that, so I'm curious about why not. And for example, one of the things I've heard folks say tonight is, well, look, we'll just get rid of these beavers, and then some more will come in. And even if in the interim we'll get rid of the beavers, but then we gotta go in and knock down the dam and dig up the wetland. And, or potentially, we might. So I'm curious about the financial impact of having to deal with beavers probably every year, because now there's so many beavers, some other beavers are just gonna come back and maybe build a different dam. What would the financial impact be of installing a beaver deceiver, and would that be able to mitigate beavers and the potential, not beavers, but the high water levels for an extended period of time? So might that not be a better financial investment than having to deal with beavers, use town resources to have these conversations every single year, and potentially still not resolve the problem of the high water levels?
From my understanding, the beaver deceivers were several thousand a piece, plus they need regular maintenance, where the beavers would be about $150 a piece to trap them, and there is no guarantee that they come back. In fact, other areas of the town where we have trapped them, they have not come back, or they've come back once and then they've been clear, and it hasn't been an issue. So we'd be looking at potentially thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars.
Well, there are
I
those
believe there's
brands
a
out there to
convenient
take care of
omission.
that,
So there's some funding.
to help compensate for that.
There would be no cost to the town.
The devices, there are several different devices I had brought up before,
Yeah.
and there are several grants that have been looked into to take care of the cost of everything.
So potentially it would actually be less expensive to install the beaver deceivers, especially if we're considering we're gonna have to potentially, we don't know yet, but we also don't know potentially about what's actually gonna happen with the septic field. It could be more expensive in the long term to have to be trapping and killing beavers every year, plus the amount of time and town resources it takes up to deal with this sort of like conflict within the
So at
town.
least get an accurate assessment of what it's gonna be. I mean, if you just gotta generally say it's too expensive, well, what's that mean? How much is that? Because maybe I'll put it in. I mean, how much is it? Do you know?
I know we looked it up in the past, I don't know.
Well, I think
offhand.
maybe the accuracy of the whole judgment should be gauged on what the deciding factor is. And if the deciding factor is it's just too expensive instead of all these other things, then how much is it? And maybe you'll get more people saying, yeah, you're right, but I don't know. I can see digging up and rerouting the septic as being expensive, but a beaver deceiver might be a nice solution. Whether that's his business or not, I think he is the expert in the state. And like the guy said, I think I read some stuff that he's, consulted in other states as well that have been successful in doing it with lots more beavers than we're talking about here. So, unless there's some other alternative motive behind not trying it, get him in, see what it's gonna cost. Is that something that can be done?
And personally, with so many residents wanting to try something, we should try something.
It's not gonna cost the town anything. And we can, what I don't wanna get into is, okay, now we're gonna have to dig a test pit to see how high the water level is, because we don't know how low that needs to be.
She already said you're gonna have to spend all sorts of money getting rid of them in the end anyway. You're gonna have to dig it out,
Well, it's gonna be-
wetland problem.
No, we don't dig it out, we remove the beavers.
And that's it, you just leave it the way it is.
Yeah, the dam will.
And you hope
will
nobody
itself.
comes back and repopulates it, is what you're saying.
If they come back next year, well, then we bring the trapper back.
Well, I think you should at least try.
At least give it a try, I agree.
You should at least see.
At least give it a try.
If there wasn't any other solutions, I think there'd be more people on your side. But I think,
I think there's more people on our side that just don't.
well, there's probably more people on our side that
Strongly.
just don't want to come out
They
to
just don't
town,
feel
get involved
strongly
with
about
civics.
it.
I get it, I don't want to be involved. But I'm starting to be involved because I believe the animals and their effect on our ecology, overall environment. And I think it's been proven unilaterally across the nation the difference these animals make in the environment. Big difference. They bring in all sorts of other animals that are,
And then that's one thing we don't want,
necessary.
more animals right next to the main route.
well, that's a downside to having roads and animals. I agree. I'm not a big fan of seeing them dead there either, but I think that you gotta do as much as you can.
So if the primary concern is financial, would it be possible to see if we could get one of those grants, which would potentially provide a lasting solution? If we could get a grant so we don't have to pay for the Beaver deceiver and that's a lasting solution, could we explore that option?
As long as we can find out if that's going to lower the water enough to not be an issue with the septic. If there's no issue with the septic, then there's no issue with the beavers.
Is the septic working now?
Yes.
And we've got massive.
Well, we haven't been over to check it.
Okay, but,
Just now,
but you're
but-
up to so far, it's been
Yeah.
working, so you're anticipatory in this regard,
Yeah.
and I get that, it's your job. But I think that, with that said, with it functioning to try.
And I don't want to be the person on the board,
Yeah.
on the board who made the decision to
Yeah.
do this, and then 10 years down the road, it's a $300,000 bill because we have to put in a new septic system.
300,000, 10 years, no. Maybe there's solutions, but yeah, I get it. Just look
Well,
at it.
there's, after we try this, and if there's immediate need to, that's in jeopardy, the septic system, and immediate danger, we can just go ahead and take care of it when we see fit. But until then, I feel we really should try to, work with, so to speak, work with the beavers.
I'd like to say something that has almost nothing to do with beavers and everything to do with the septic system at this point. When I came over here tonight, Mr. Knapp's lawn is completely underwater, and the cemetery is completely underwater, and it has nothing to do with beavers. It has everything to do with the fact that we are having an historic level rain event, that every single weather report and V-Trans alert and state emergency management report that I listened to or read today said we need to prepare ourselves to face the fact that these events are going to become the norm. So we probably ought to consider our septic tank in terms of, or our leach field in terms of the bigger picture, instead of this one tiny little beaver lens, that maybe we need to do something about the leach field anyway, because for as long as there's that culvert coming off of Manning Road, sending water across the Knapp's lawn into the cemetery, we're always gonna have a water problem there, and by all accounts, that's a problem we can't control to the extent that we might be able to control water levels caused by beaver activity.
The main difference is those beavers are causing the ground level water, the normal where the groundwater sits, to rise up. So if that's the case.
Oh, I didn't understand that.
Yeah,
Okay.
so one-time
okay.
flooding where it's coming over the
Yeah.
top isn't the issue, it's the
Okay,
groundwater.
okay, then I stand corrected.
So that's where.
The possible remedy is the same, though. I mean, you could rethink the distribution of the leach field. I don't know the layout here or whatever, but
And if inundation events like this destabilize the
Yeah.
surface soil enough, you're still gonna have a problem with that septic. So it is something to consider. So
Yeah.
that's my first thing, and then the second thing that I'd just like to say, and again, this is now a 2.5-year-old memory, and it could be fuzzy, but when the water line to our well failed a couple of years ago, and a bunch of us talked about how expensive it would be if we had to dig up Route 302, you didn't think that that was a valid reason to dig a well, even though we had a well estimate for $12,000, and instead we spent $8,000 to patch an old pipe that will probably fail again.
And I was against that too. My suggestion at that time was we have the tools, the equipment, and the knowledge to do it ourselves for a few $100s. And the crew did not want to do that, and the board voted to hire an outside company to dig a hole in the yard, even though we had just bought a $120,000 piece of equipment that digs holes.
Well, I think that my bigger point is that at the time that other people in the room presented an argument that was based on a solution that would cost less than something that hadn't yet occurred, it wasn't something that you were willing to consider. So it just seems a little contradictory to me. So I just wanted to put that out there.
And has anybody priced out what it costs to relocate the leach field here?
No, that would be an expense that we don't want to incur.
Well, I mean, you're not talking about the septic, right, just the leach field?
Yeah,
It would require a whole
A
new
whole new
overnight
septic tank,
permit.
too.
It would be an expensive
It would be
proposition, there's no
expensive just to
doubt.
find out, because we'd have to hire an engineer to come in and do the work.
And then A&R would have to permit it.
And that's what we're gonna have to, not hire an engineer, but we may need to find out where the water table sits to figure out where we're gonna have to set the beaver receivers for the depth. So we'll have to see.
That's no guarantee there, because you put that in, then they're gonna move down and fill the dam blow.
Probably
Is that-
others downstream will take care of those.
Well, no, I mean, they're
We've already
just,
said that
they'll
they don't.
just kind of set below where we got it on town property and built another dam. And then you'll have the same problem.
There's no elevation change there? I mean, if they went lower, it would still keep the water table backed up here?
Yep.
How does it, seeking information now, so, because this is not information that I'd considered before, but how does the presence of a beaver pond raise the groundwater level? I don't understand what that connect
By
is.
holding back the water in an area that's behind it.
That's surface water, that's not groundwater.
Well, it does raise the groundwater too. I mean, all the groundwater's underneath, it's coming up higher and higher as you hold back the surface water. It's just all, it becomes, that's
soaks
what
in the
ponds
ground.
and aquifers and all that, they all act as one. But I still think that if you change the location of where a beaver could be on a lower level, that the water could no way be held back. A dam couldn't hold that much water back to keep it high, the water table high up here on the flat area. It would then lower the water table up here and raise it down there where the new location of the dam would be. So
Depends how much
just-
elevation change there is.
Yeah, elevation change if the beavers were allowed to go lower, a deceiver in an area. Again, I don't know that,
Sounds like that might be a good question for the state specialist, since we're thinking not just about the short term, but the
This guy's
long-term
done as much
consequences
as
of all
he-
these different mitigation
we've read.
strategies.
He's gonna have seen all sorts of different situations where water levels and things are being affected and why towns make those decisions.
What I'm worried about is the first thing they're gonna say is, well, where's the water table and where's your leach field? And without
Because of the
going,
expense of finding out where the water table is.
You can't allow your concerns, though, to not seek the truth to this very practical
Yeah.
situation.
Have to agree.
I'm trying to figure out the least expensive way to the taxpayer to figure out the solution to the problem.
And that's why I think that it's best to not necessarily rely on the opinions of us, but the experts of the state who deal with these issues. Tyler Brown fields 400 calls a year on beaver conflicts. Not unique to us. You know, he is the person who can answer all these questions.
And is there any cost to the town to consult with Tyler Brown?
No.
But he won't be able to tell us where the base level of our leach field is.
No, but he's
That-
probably seen enough
that doesn't mean
situations
he
where he's
might
gonna be
not
able
have
to say,
some
look,
helpful
your table's
information
gonna
and
drop a
insight.
couple feet here, and that's probably gonna put your leach field clear or not clear. I mean, how deep is the leach field in the, you don't have any idea?
Well, we
We
do
don't
have
know.
plans, and it seems like there would be historical information about when it
Yeah.
was built to
But
rely
in the
on.
old days, they didn't always, in leach fields, they didn't always record stuff like
Of
that.
course, of course.
You know, they went out digging and they put stuff in the ground and that was that.
It's planned for
They do.
future, but
Probably just test pits.
I think just entertaining it makes sense. There's enough people, there's enough concern that you should at least entertain the thought of having somebody that knows what they're talking about look at it. If they come in and say, oh, you know, I wouldn't know, you might need to get a study done, well, then maybe somebody else would say, yeah, we're on your side with that thought.
kind of why I reached out to Fish and Game and
Well,
said they.
game wardens, come on. They're cops with that,
Mike Scott's a trapper.
yeah, I don't, the Fish and Game in this state is really biased.
Well, you know,
So-
I'd like to say something about, in behalf of Mike Scott, since he's not here to defend himself. I've dealt with him on beaver issues. I love beaver. I have, on my property, there's a pond. I fish it.
Good.
I do whatever. I hate over in Groton. I had issues with the thing, and his thing was not to trap him.
Yeah.
Do this, do that, do everything else. We did everything he asked.
He seems like a nice guy, yeah.
We got him to leave, and then the neighbor above wanted to keep him. So, and they just kept coming in, and then before we knew, there were well more of them than we could handle, so we ended up trapping them. We had to, there was nothing else we could do. I mean, and I think
Maybe.
we're kind of in that same boat here. Because we're so far by allowing those beavers to build a dam there, we can no longer harass the beaver to get them out of
Well,
there.
it's too late for that. I think
Yes,
the
we're past that
consensus is somebody should chill
But-
up the line and find some experts to see what's going on, that's all.
But the problem we have is like, it was made that Eric has a thing, well, was on the board at the time that they didn't do something with the beaver, so it's kind of like the same conflict of interest in my view. I mean, am I seeing this wrong?
Just because she didn't make decisions, you don't know what her thoughts were of it 2 years
But
ago. But I think, yeah,
She don't know what his thoughts is either, but she made that comment, and I'm kind of thinking, you
Well,
know,
because there's a policy,
I ain't accusing nobody of nothing, I'm just,
I don't think conflict of interest.
there's a policy, and I'm not a public official
Yeah.
anymore, and what actions I made, like, you all continue to change those decisions, and that has no bearing on me, nor is it a conflict of interest for me as a resident to now have both an opinion or to assert facts in the matter.
Well, I'm curious, Kevin, why aren't you holding Eric accountable for not taking action when he was on the select board earlier?
Yeah, we both were the ones that spoke with Tyler Brown in July of 2021 and made that
I
decision.
said past select board members didn't do
And then
their
pointed
part.
to me as if it was a conflict of interest of mine.
I just
There were
did,
three of
because you
us that
kind of
voted.
made the same comment to him, and I just said, it kind of goes, it looked, in my view,
The town's conflict of interest and ethical conduct policy is only beholden to individuals that are elected officials, of which I am no longer, frankly, thank goodness.
Does the past really matter then? I mean, does it? No, we're talking about beavers now and your septic system. I think it's
but
irrelevant.
the thing is we can't do the nuisance, we can't harass the beaver to get them to leave.
We already know
I
that,
think what he's
okay? We
trying to say
agree.
is, in the Beaver policy, not policy, the mitigation best practices.
Harass first, get them out, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the
Do what you do.
procedures change on what they recommend for best practices
sense.
if the beaver dam has been there more than 2 years.
Yeah.
So the more we delay, the more that we
Well, if it's
delay.
already 2 years, what can you do?
We can still do whatever we need to do to protect town assets. However, if we're following the best management practices,
You
It's
stated
been
that, you
delayed
know you
for-
have the ultimate right to do what you do to protect the assets, we already know that, but I think we also agree, and I think there's pretty much a consensus here, except for a couple, that just ask the experts, get them out, see if there's another solution, and go from there. I mean, nobody's gonna argue with you once you get down the road that if
we
it's
are
just too
arguing about
expensive,
it.
it's
That's the problem.
prohibitive.
We're gonna ask the experts again and again and again.
Well, have you asked the
We don't
experts? You
get
just went,
the-
you just went to the warden, that's all you've done.
So as town residents, I
Not
think we're
ta-
making two specific requests. This is what I'm hearing from this group of interested town residents and taxpayers. Could the select board please consult with the state beaver specialist and document those results and recommendations? And if those recommendations include the use of beaver deceivers, could we explore the option to at least find out if we could get grants to pay for it? Both of those options will cost the town absolutely nothing.
I'm sure he'd look at it too, right, just to see if it's something his product would work with.
And as this gentleman is saying, if we talk to the specialist and he's like, you know, you're right, at this point, you should just trap them, because that's all you can do, and otherwise it's gonna cost $12,000 to deal with it, that's fine, that's very, very reasonable. I just, for myself, I would like to know that we've explored all the different
That's
options,
simple.
including the long-term cost benefit of all of those options. Especially the steps that don't cost the town anything to do.
And come back with it, actually, you know, at least so we know it's been done. I mean, I think there was a valid point that if you're gonna talk to somebody and get told that this is the way it should be, then there should be some kind of documentation of it. I say nobody's not saying you're lying or not trusting you, but that's just the way we have to do it, so that's the way you should have to do it. And I'm not, I say we in a very broad sense, because I have not done any providing of proof here, but other people have, I do know that. So, you know, with that said, you know, get the guy in, give us his report. I'm sure he'd be willing to at least give you an email on what he finds and what he believes. And I'm sure the guy selling the product would come out and take a look and give his opinion. I mean, and obviously a well-versed opinion. So nobody's trying to pin you in the corner and say you're bad. They're just trying to get something done that makes sense for the environment. And those animals, they just mean more than they used to 100 years ago. And I think we ought to take a little bit of extra effort to make that happen. And she seems to think that we could get somebody in to to look at it or quote or whatever, let's just do it. Make it a business decision. Get something done. You can do it.
Well, I'd be willing to go a couple more weeks, as long as there's no expense to the town.
And what are the grants, you say, are these federal,
What do you
state?
think?
Federal, state, and private, there's multiple.
Quite a process, I would imagine, more than a couple
The
weeks.
private ones are actually pretty quick, and they're within the state,
I
yeah.
mean, you know how to access these?
We've already contacted
Oh,
the
you have?
foundations and have pledges from several of them.
Really? What kind of pledges?
Pledges to provide funding for Beaver Deceiver if the town is opting to use
Oh,
the
what's that? How much?
Yeah, we need to talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, saying it out loud here makes a big difference, I would say. If you already have possible funds.
Excuse me, we're trying to have a meeting.
I'm sorry.
Next meeting, we're gonna record it.
Okay. Thank you.
That's what we're gonna do.
I'm taking minutes, I'm sorry. Can you tell me what you're doing? I'm sorry.
I was gonna go ahead and contact Tyler Brown, email, and see if he can come out and assess the area
Okay.
and write up a report on his findings
Okay,
and
thanks.
suggestions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, then, up next on the agenda, we have discuss or consider documenting the current hunting and trapping town land policy. This was just a quick draft that I did based on what our current policy is and has been all along in the town. I'll read it because I didn't print out copies for everyone. The town of Orange supports public use of town-owned land. Historically, there have been no restrictions on the use of town land for hunting, fishing, and trapping. This document reinforces the long-standing policy of the town, allowing unrestricted hunting, fishing, and trapping on town property unless otherwise posted. The town of Orange recognizes that regulated hunting and trapping is one of the most effective and economical tools available for land management. And I just go into game meat as an excellent source of affordable organic nutrition, harvesting locally grown free-range meats, better for health and supports local communities. Even at modern population levels, deer can have a significant impact on native plant species, particularly wildflowers, rare plants, and commercially valuable trees. High wildlife populations can increase disease and parasitic risks to people, pets, and other wildlife. These include rabies, distemper, mange, malaria, Lyme disease, and raccoon ringworm. Vermont has one of the highest incidence rates of Lyme disease in the United States. Hunting and trapping can reduce human-wildlife conflicts such as vehicle collisions, agricultural crop loss, ornamental and property damage, predation of pests, and other issues such as fouling of ponds by Canadian geese. By this policy, permission is granted if somebody wants to trap, erect a tree stand or ground blind, park, drive, or camp on town land, or guide hunters or anglers on town property. People are encouraged to report instances of harassment to Fish and Wildlife Board as well as the Selectboard for appropriate action. Vermont law states that a person shall not intentionally interfere with the lawful taking of fish or wild animals. This includes things like tampering with traps, nets, baits, or firearms by placing himself or herself in a position for the purpose of interfering that hinders, prevents hunting, trapping, or fishing, or by engaging in any activity for the purpose of interfering that drives, harasses, disturbs, or is likely to disturb wildlife or fish. This document is written confirmation of an existing policy.
Okay, I think we should take out the park and drive or camp on town land.
Yeah, because a lot of people have fires and stuff. And that's what we need.
Yeah, a lot of this I just cut and paste from Fish and Wildlife.
And could we add in here somewhere where everything adheres to the laws and the rules of the
I thought about
Fish and Wildlife?
putting that in, but it would be illegal for them not to anyway. And if we put anything that would be a violation of the policy, then we have to come up with an enforcement method of it. So it's like saying you can't go and murder somebody in the woods. You already can't, so why would we put that in?
So we can put that everything needs to adhere to their rules and regulations of the Fish and Game Wildlife.
Well, because then you're doing the, you're falling under that tree stand thing. You have to have written permission and,
This serves as written permission. So any lawful activity, I guess we can put that. Because we can't give anybody permission to break the law, to break state law.
Right.
So by saying that you have to follow state law would just be redundant in our policy.
Okay, any unlawful activity.
Any unlawful activity would be unlawful whether or not it's in our written policy or not.
Okay.
If some residents' intent is to save the beavers, could you post the area around the beavers for no trapping? I mean, we're trying to save their lives and allowing them to be trapped and hunted,
Well, we don't.
along with the rest of the land, doesn't make
We
sense.
theoretically could. See, this has just been our
I
policy
get it.
all along.
That doesn't mean things don't change. I've heard that in the military for many, many years. That was how we do it. But that's not the way things
We
go.
got notice from the state that the state for some reason now considers municipal property as private property. So
So
they
you have the right to post it around the
we have to
beavers.
post it, but if anyone wants to do what they could always have done in the past on our property, like put a tree stand or a ground line and hunt.
Now, if you post it,
No, but if they want to, Fish and Wildlife says each person needs written permission now. And that's a new policy, and the town has never required anybody to get written permission.
well, I get what you're doing generally, but I'm just saying this little area, you just post it and that's the end of that, and you don't, there's one more problem out the window. You don't gotta worry about it.
Hunting in general has never required permission. It's only outside activities of that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a big deal,
But if
actually,
we're
I
gonna
mean,
post it, we
especially if
should post it.
everybody's intent
But
is
if we're
to
gonna
keep
tell
the
one
beavers.
group of people they can't use that piece of property, I would say we need to tell everybody.
Well, all you gotta do is say no hunting and trapping, you know,
Well,
go.
I'd say no trespassing then either. If we're gonna ban hunting and trapping, that's a large
That's your
constituent of our
opinion,
population.
I'll go
And
with
we should
that.
stop anybody from using it. If we're gonna tell one group of people you can't use this piece of property,
Well, we let others.
well, we let others.
Yeah, it's hard to impossible to enforce stuff like that around here anyway, I bet, but
So the grant-
right here, you could enforce it, you know, pretty much. They're not gonna encroach on the town hall and an area that we're trying to save some beavers. so-
Yeah, but the idea is the whole thing is if you tell, you all of a sudden say, okay, we don't want hunters down here trapping, so
Yeah.
now we got the school over here taking kids down there, and so the hunters will be like, well, how come we can't go down, they go down there, how
Okay,
come we
kids
can't?
down there, you got it.
Kids aren't trapping.
No,
Yeah,
but-
they're not consumptive
but-
users,
but-
and the town grant committee has just raised multiple $1,000s to create a solution that's going to save your septic, and then you're going to exclude the local school from doing what they've done for years. and running up the local-
I'm not saying excluding the school, I'm trying to give you an example why we're not gonna post any property, because we're not gonna exclude against anybody from using anything.
But that's kind of off topic anyway. This topic is whether or not we want to put our current policy in writing, which would allow everybody to put up tree stands, use ground blinds, without having to get written permission from the select board in every single case. So that way, the way the state has it now, if they want to put a tree stand or a ground blind up, they want the select board to meet to review each individual person and say yes or no. And that is just too much for the select board to do. And when I reached out to the state's attorney, they said, oh yeah, just one blanket policy would cover everybody, and that would be good. So if we did this policy, we took what we already allow and have allowed since the beginning of this town, unrestricted, tree stands, ground blinds.
Well, it's a very cherry-picked fish and wildlife statement about why hunting and trapping and all this is so useful and how terrible the animals are and how horrible they
That was
are
cut
for our
and paste right
environment.
from fish.
Yeah, you
No,
did.
it's-
You extracted it right out and put it right in, didn't you?
You can't be making policy on hunting and trapping that opens up all town lands to hunting as you run a game processing
I'm
plan.
not
That is a
changing
conflict of interest,
I'm
sir.
not changing any policy.
That is,
sir.
you're gonna profit from this decision.
This
Where's
is,
where's the policy on record?
this has been,
Where's the signature and what date?
there isn't one. This has been policy in town. The town
Then
has
it's
never,
not memorialized
Stop.
officially if
You
there's no
didn't sign it in
signature.
February at the meeting when we addressed this issue.
the town has never, in its history, required written permission to put up a tree stand.
Rita
ground
Bisson gave
blind.
written permission to individuals
Mhm.
legally. And this is not an official policy that the town has been bound to if there is no
When
signature
Rita
or
was in
date.
office, I don't think the law stated we had to have written permission.
No.
I definitely understand the
And like you
desire to
said-
codify an existing policy, whether it's written or just sort of historical tradition. And I absolutely can understand your point that making everyone get written permission for every single little tree stand, blind, whatever they want to put up would be an unreasonable burden on town resources, specifically your time. I hear that. I just want to express my own personal concern. I have 2 dogs, And I have a real concern about sort of codifying the open use of traps, which in my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, would include the use of body traps. And we know there was a woman whose dog was killed by the use of a body trap not that far from here last year. So for my own personal desires, I really make a distinction between hunting and trapping in terms of their effect on domesticated animals. So I personally would support a written policy that allows people to hunt without written permission, but I have some really deep concerns about codifying the use of traps for everyone on all town land without any restriction or permission.
You're walking a dog out there and bang.
Or you can have a blanket policy that would allow people with high-powered rifles to hunt on a small portion of town property that's surrounded by houses and our cemetery. That's just irresponsible. Archery is okay, I'm not opposed to hunting, but you have to look specifically. Town forest is a large block, a lot more hunting can be done there, but you're talking about here, I personally was involved with the interaction because I went to go hunt on town land and I was harassed. I reported it to a warden, you're full well aware of this, and I do not feel that past actions have warranted a blanket policy. I think there needs to be specific conditions for specific town lands.
Eric, is this the current policy you're saying, or you made this up?
I
Like you
made this up.
You made it, okay, I
The
just-
current policy is unwritten. We've never
So we don't have
required.
It was assumed.
So this isn't the
It's an
current
assumed
policy,
policy.
because if you
Assumed
just wrote it,
policy.
it's not, it's
Well, I
not
didn't know.
a
So it's not a policy.
So this is when
The
they
way the
had-
town has historically worked,
So you made it.
So
I
it
just
was
trying to
changed.
understand what's
and I
going on.
believe, you can double check me on this, and don't quote me on it, but from my work with the state when I
Right.
was in agriculture, if the state or if a town or anything
Right.
does one thing all the time, even if it's not documented, that can be considered policy and be upheld in court.
Okay, so you can't camp on town property? When can I go out camping in the town forest?
People do,
Do you?
yeah.
I was just wondering, because,
That's a liability.
I was just wondering,
No.
sorry. I just asking
Yeah.
if you can, yeah.
You give them blanket permission to camp on town
we-
property, it's
if-
not your responsibility?
Nope.
That's why we were
It's
talking about
it's
taking this out.
it's actually the opposite. If we restrict some uses, like if we restrict trapping, for instance, well, then we open ourselves up to possible liability in hunting accidents because we show some kind of awareness that there could be an issue. And that's what the courts have decided.
Well, there could be an
Could
issue.
we see a record of
I want
this?
to camp.
No.
What statute are you saying?
And the other thing I was going to bring up is the Vermont Constitution. Inhabitants of the state shall have the liberty at seasonable times to hunt and fowl on lands they hold. So this being public land in our Constitution that allows people to hunt on their own land, this is publicly held land. I would kind of argue that the Constitution of Vermont says that they...
Trapping is not in the Constitution. Trapping is not in
It's
there.
not, no. Hunt and fowl.
Some of them could be separated.
So that's what we should be talking about.
Why don't we just go back to just having, back to just the policy for the hunting blinds? That's how this originated.
Well, because we have a lot of people that want trapping too. Or not a lot. I know one person who's come to me and asked that he wants trapping.
We don't care about one person, do we?
Well, we would still have the option to give, you could give special permission for trapping, right? Having a policy that gives a blanket okay for hunting wouldn't prevent the board from giving permission to certain people to trap in certain circumstances. And then you could create reasonable parameters around what that is. And it sounds like if there's just a few people who are interested in trapping, that wouldn't be an undue burden on town resources.
I'm still in favor of just leaving the trapping in there. I don't see any reason. Trappers are responsible people. There are some people, like in any instance of anything in the world, there are some people who don't do it right.
Camping there.
Yeah, that was just cut and
Yeah, I
paste.
do.
I didn't see that till afterwards, but
Yeah, he did say camping, didn't he?
yeah, I need cut and paste from
You gonna take that out?
policy. Yes,
Yeah,
we're gonna
it's
take out
crossed
the park, drive,
Good
or
catch.
camp
Yep.
on town land.
May I
I wondered
comment?
that myself. Didn't sound
I
right.
have a few things to note. The town has not always done it the way that you have cited, especially not in the last 3 years. So I think it is historically inaccurate to state that we have had this universal policy that has been enacted from select board to select board. I know of incidents from Redebissen through my 3 years on the term that that what you have just cited is not how the town has operated. So save that, maybe there's a big swath of time in between. saying that trappers are responsible or that everything's gonna work okay, I take a big issue with. V-Trans hired a trapper that has trapped here in the town of Orange, that trapped a kit out of the cemetery within the last year, who has 4 violations in a 12-month period for incidental take and for an illegal trap that was left out and took an animal out of season. So I think that is one specific incident that I think is important to really recognize that. I also just wanted to take issue because you're interpretive of the Constitution saying that everyone has access to everything in these private lands is not how the Secretary of State or VLCT interpret town land is considered private. And I will go back to Article 5A of the town's conflict of interest policy. A public officer should not participate in any official act that he has a conflict of interest, whether real or perceived, in the matter under consideration.
I'll make a motion that we accept this policy with the one change of the park, drive, and camp on town land.
I second.
I'm undecided.
I propose you post right out here.
With the exception of what, Eric?
The park, drive, or camp on town land.
Okay.
I'm going to make a point of order that a conflict of interest has been pointed out and a public official is asked to recuse themselves from a matter that has a direct financial interest and an indirect personal interest. It's a violation of our town policy.
I don't think you're gonna ruin any hunter or trapper's day just by posting this area that's close to these houses and stuff and beavers. So I don't know what your rationale for not wanting to do that, separation of areas
Well,
or
it's
whatever,
we
but it doesn't
can't
make
do
sense.
that right now because it's not on the agenda. The agenda item
Oh,
we're discussing
all right,
is
all right.
just
I
whether or
get
not
that.
to put this into
I'm not a
writing.
politician, I get it.
I second it. Call motion.
But isn't there still a conflict of interest with you voting on that? With the business you're in and about the trapping and hunting?
Now, this doesn't, I don't do anything with trapping. I do process wild game,
Right.
and
So you would need to
this
talk
doesn't,
about,
this doesn't, I don't think this would be a conflict of interest, but if you'd like me to recuse myself on this vote, I can withdraw. But that would leave just the two of you on it. I don't see how this would be a direct conflict where I process the wild game. I'm not a hunter. In fact, most of the deer I process do not come from the town of Orange because our hunters know how to butcher their own animals. So unfortunately, I'm only getting the ones from people who don't know how to cut up meat. But if you want to consider it to be a perceived conflict of interest, and where this isn't even a change in the policy, as far as I'm concerned, it's not going to expand hunting in town. People have always hunted in the town forest and on town property without written permission.
You're also inviting in open policy for trapping, and that's very new. Because currently, the law states that municipal lands, you must require permission
It's never
to trap on
been
them.
enforced in town, that no one's ever come to the town and asked permission to trap on our property.
But they are required to by law if they desire to. That's the current
So we're
policy.
gonna put that into.
That's state policy.
Yeah,
I would also
same
like to
as
say,
erect a tree stand or ground blind,
Mhm.
and they've never done that either.
They have. David Gomo came to Rita Bisson and requested permission, and that's on,
He asked for permission to hunt in the.
no, he asked for permission to erect a ground blind, according to the meeting minutes in February 2023.
Oh, yes, because he was told that
Was
this
of-
new
He
policy
asked
came
Rita
in
Bisson.
in
He asked, he
2023.
received, no, historically, he received permission from Rita Bisson, so it's inaccurate to say that no one has approached the town for permission.
Well, he told me that he asked for permission to hunt and to put up a ground blind in town property.
also this policy, I think it's important to note, I suggested be removed, that all the quote that you did about diseases that are a threat of wildlife, unless those have been documented in Orange, I don't know why you're even mentioning that, because it hasn't happened. Nobody's getting mange, nobody's getting rabies. If there's an incident, please let us know.
Next time I
Rita
see you,
Bisson never thought about the Lyme
I'll let
disease
you know.
increasing.
That's what I meant by cherry picking that area out of the wildlife thing. I mean, it gives you some kind of power about your whole policy in general because of those things, I guess. But I don't see how you can't, why you can't separate trapping.
Are there
Trapping
copies?
that exposes our animals and our pets and all sorts of other things. And there's more animals killed, people trying to get specific species and getting the wrong species over and over. It's been proven. There's just no need for it on that small amount of public land, our land. Why?
Are there
I don't
copies
want
of
to
this
be
policy
here.
that we can review? I know you read it, Eric, but you're fairly soft-spoken, so I would love to be able to just. Thank you, Angela.